A good antagonist needs a way to get from point A to point B. And in DBD, this is accomplished through walking, or running, jogging, crawling. There's even that one floater, whatever the heck this is. Anyway, tonight we will be tier listing every unaliver, anti-survivor, gen kickers, endgame walk. Gen kicker sounds like a 5th grade playground insult, doesn't it?
You're such a gen kicker.
Like, comment, subscribe for the algorithm, and let's do it. All right, we're gonna start off with D tier, and it breaks my heart to say that the first one I'm putting in D tier is gonna be Huntress, with the beast on the prowl. Let's start with the positives. Hers is intimidating, and I can just imagine being one of those German soldiers in a foxhole, peering up over top of it, looking through the darkness as her lullaby hangs through the air, and suddenly out of the fog, she comes running at you like this. Yeah, that's brown pants worthy. But as much as I love Huntress, and I think this fits her pretty well, it's also pretty basic. There's a lot more of them that are gonna get much more interesting. So for that reason, I've sadly had to go D tier for her. All right, next up we have Hag with the Freaky Frolic. To me, it looks like she's running a miniature version of the 400-meter hurdles. It's kind of a gallop. It does fit her character because her body's all broken down. It's okay, it's just really repetitive. Now, I know technically all of them are repetitive, but for some reason hers feels even more so than the others. Her movements are quick and there's a lot of range to them. So I think that makes it look more obvious in how it just repeats over and over and over again. Hers to me feels like a record skipping, so I've got to go D tier with it. All right, next up we have Freddy with the Dream Wanderer. Yes, I put just as much effort into that name as behavior put into Freddy's shop cosmetics. Somebody is going to say in the comments, well, Freddy doesn't have any shop cosmetics. Yes, that's the joke. Now, as for what I like, the wispy movement of his claw hand is kind of cool. I don't know, I'm stretching here. It's basic and boring. Just like the remake, I gotta go D tier with this one. Next up we have Amanda with the not so sneaky pig. For a stealth character, she's not being very stealthy here. I like the overall pose, but the stride is unique, but not in a way that helps her. It really kind of like Hag makes it very obvious that it's repetitive. To me, it looks a little unnatural and actually breaks the immersion. It's just very obvious to me that you're watching the same 60 frame loop over and over again. So that makes it another D tier for me. Next up we have Deathslinger with the staggered stride. Deathslinger's is weird to me because it's clear he's gliding on the ground, kind of like he's on an ice rink or something like that. It's weird. He's made to look like he's moving more slowly because of his limp. However, the background is moving just as fast as with all the others, which makes it look abnormally weird to me. There's no way his legs are that long. He does look around a little bit, which is something, I guess. The movement pattern is very on point for his character, lore-wise, but it just looks weird. He's defying physics, and it melts my mind, and it just doesn't look right. So gotta go D tier. All right, next up is gonna be C tier, and the first one in this category is gonna be Trapper with what I call the confident swagger. He walks with authority, there's an aggressiveness to his stride, he's an intimidating hulk of a man, and his walk matches that. But that said, it's not the most interesting walk in the world. It's kinda okay. So he's going in C tier for me. Next up is Wraith with what I call the graceful scamper. He looks like he's at a moderate sprint and not even breaking a sweat about it. It's a little weird that his left hand is permanently locked in a claw form. I don't know, maybe he's got carpal tunnel or something. Who knows? It makes him somewhat less scary looking to me, so it's okay. It's not great, it's okay. So C tier it is. Up next, we're actually rounding out the original 3 characters because we've got Hillbilly with the I stepped on a Lego. Now he clearly doesn't let his injured leg slow him down at all because he's still moving pretty well. This showcases his impressive strength, carrying in one hand the cattle hammer and the other his chainsaw. To be honest, I would have preferred his chainsaw sprint here. But I know these are probably just their walk animations, and the chainsaw sprint is technically his special ability, so I don't know, there might be a coding issue with the game where they can't do that, but I do feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity. So I'm going C tier for him as well. It's fitting for his character's lore, but it's less interesting for me. Next up in C tier, we have Doctor with the electric charge. Yes, pun intended. He's in a full all-out sprint. I love the detail of the electric sparks that follow behind him. But ultimately, he's just basic running. Not that interesting. I'm putting him in C tier. All right, next up we have Ghostface with the Spectre Sprint. He too is in an all-out sprint. But like Pig, it's not the stealthiest of movements for, you know, a stealth character. It's pretty basic and it's blatantly repetitive. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. So C tier it is. All right, next up we have the Bounding Blight. everything about this fits his character well. It looks like he's either prepared to strike or take off at a full sprint at any moment. His stride is huge. That said, I've still chosen to put him in C tier because it's basic and repetitive. All right, next up is Trickster with what I'm calling the Jester's Jog. So as for what I like about this walk, he's leaned forward and in full sprint. His exaggerated movements really fit his showman personality quite well. But what I don't like about it is that it's basic and repetitive. The way his bat moves, it looks like a Fisher-Price toy, like it's got no weight to it. So it just feels like it defies physics somehow. Because of those things, I have to go C tier. It's okay. It's not great, or even good in my opinion. It's got enough flair to keep him out of D tier, but not much beyond that. All right, moving on to B tier, we start this category off with Myers with the runway strut. There's so much movement going on here, except for his head. Now, I've only seen the original Halloween movie, and I don't remember a single time that he moves this much. So I can't really say if this is an accurate movement pattern for his character. Somebody who knows more can let me know down in the comments. But there's clearly a lot of concentration going on here to keep his head centered perfectly while the rest of his body just peacocks around. It's the antithesis to his lobby stance where he just stands there and stares at you motionless, breathing. He's very carefree with that knife too, the way he waves it around like that, which, yeah, come to think of it, is pretty on point for his character. If for no other reason than it cracks me up a little bit because it looks like he's walking the runway at a fashion show, I'm gonna put him in B tier for that. All right, next up we have Legion with the Jock Jog. Yes, this is the point in the video where I am now regretting trying to come up with creative names for all of these walks. Now what's cool is Legion has a different walk for each of the 4 members of the Legion. Frank's is very controlled, as if he's preserving energy for an all-out sprint. Joey looks like a linebacker running out getting ready to tackle someone. Julie's looks a little unnatural to me, almost Demogorgon-like with her long limbs. But hers also has the most variety so far. Now I don't have any of Susie's skins, and I'll be honest, I don't like any of them enough to spend money on them, so I'm not able to show you hers. But I do like that each of the members of the Legion have their own unique walk depending on who you've picked. I think it's a cool detail. Individually, they're not that interesting, and I'd probably put them as far down as D tier. But together they provide variety. So for that reason, I elevate them up to B tier. All right, next up we've got Oni with the Troll Trot. Get it? Because Onis are Japanese trolls. Troll Trot. He's got a massive stride, he's hulking and intimidating. I like how he shifts around how he's carrying his sword. He looks around a lot as well, not just straight ahead like some of them. In general, it's kind of basic, but there's those subtle things that add some flair to make it more interesting to me. So I'm happy to put him in B tier. All right, next up in B tier is gonna be Twins with the I've had enough of this crap. Charlotte just looks exhausted, shoulders slumped, arms dangling at her side. I mean, she's leaning forward as if it's gravity just helping her take one more step. Her eyes look completely glazed over and she's staring just straight ahead, zoning out. I mean, she's done. Well, Victor's just hanging out. She looks like she's just gotten done running from a mob for their lives, which is really fitting for their character. Are they a character or characters? I guess it's really fitting for their characters, and it kind of almost makes me feel bad for her. While it is mostly basic and repetitive, there's just so much personality to this one that is unique to her especially, that I think it deserves B tier. Next up we have Nemesis with the Hefty Hike. I mean, it looks like he's moving the ground beneath him. He's not walking, the earth is his treadmill. I think they did a great job capturing his imposing nature into the walk animation. He moves with pure, unwavering determination. It is basic, but I'm not really sure what more they would have done. It fits his character well. There's a lot of personality to this one as well, so I'm gonna elevate it to B tier. Plus, I might be a little biased because it's Resident Evil. Keeping it with Resident Evil, next up we have the Whisking Wesker. I mean, he is all out sprinting. This is the T1000 of DBD endgame walks. I'm not sure his mom ever told him not to run with scissors though. Talk about reckless abandon. It's somewhat hypnotic. It is basic and repetitive, but it's absolutely perfect for his character, and I think there's a lot of personality here too, so that gets it elevated to B tier. Plus the Resident Evil bias. There you go. All right, next up we have the Skipping Knight. I mean, just look at him. He looks more like a carefree kid running out to recess than a bloodthirsty knight. He just looks a little playful. It's a bit jarring, actually. I love how he holds his sword and his emo hair just flaps in the wind. It's funny, me making a hair movement like I know what that's like. It's basic, it's repetitive, it doesn't fit his character at all. I feel like I should put it C tier, but there's something about it I like, so I'm gonna stick with B tier. Subjectivity at its finest, I know. All right, next up we have Skull Merchant with the Catwalk Crawl. This one cracks me up too. It's so jarring, yet hypnotic. I mean, how does she glide so effortlessly? She's got the body control of a breakdancer. It's almost alien how she moves. It's very weird. But I will say this, it's one of the more interesting ones, for sure. I feel obligated to hate it, but if I'm being honest, I don't. It's anything but basic and boring. So ultimately, I've decided on B tier. It's far from my favorite, but it's also far from my least favorite. It is very weird though, and hard to take seriously, I'll grant you that. But I think I know a way to elevate this walk to S tier. I may have done a thing. Just for fun, I present to you the Temptation Trapper. But I didn't stop there. How about the Pleasant Priestess? Then there's the Pulsing Pursuer. Get it? Because he's called the Pursuer? And if that's not enough for you, it works with survivors as well. How about Ash the Aphrodisiac? Or Lusty Leon? Oh, it gets even better. Allow me to reveal the Provocative Pyramid. Or my personal favorite, the Shape of Seduction. You can't tell me that's not S tier. And yes, those names were significantly easier to come up with. Moving on, now we have Hux with the Cyborg Shuffle. I know that kind of breaks the same letter thing, but Cyborg Shuffle, similar sound. It works. Just roll with it. So the only downside for this one to me is that it is very repetitive. That said, everything else I love. His steps are absolutely massive. There's two very distinct movement patterns between each leg. They both look very believable. And he's one of the few ones who actually looks like he's traveling at the speed the background's moving at. The right arm is held up to keep from dragging while the left just dangles at the side. His head just bobs back and forth in a way that makes every step look truly labored. It's almost like he's throwing himself into every movement. It's perfect for Hux, and I struggle with whether or not it deserves A tier, but I think because of how repetitive it is, I'm gonna keep it in B tier. But it's a high B tier. Before we move to A tier, I wanted to take a quick moment to thank our channel members for their support of the channel. On top of supporting the channel, our members get access to unique channel perks, like member-exclusive videos from the Brown Pants Archives, a collection of my non-DBD horror game playthroughs. On top of that, there's other perks like channel badges, behind-the-scenes content, a members-only Discord channel, and more. If you're interested in becoming a member, click that join button to learn more. All right, starting off A tier now, we have Nurse with the Mopey Mondays, because this is how I imagine I look coming into work on Monday, just with less levitating. Hers is absolutely perfect to me. On the one hand, it is very basic, but she's so creepy in how she floats. And it cracks me up how her feet occasionally drag or hit on the floor. It's just a cool little detail they added. There's elements of pain, despair, and death in just the way she moves. It's perfectly creepy, and I'm happy to put her in A tier. Next up we have Bubba with the Chainsaw Prance. His just cracks me up. It's like he's being very careful with the way he runs, as if he's holding a pot of chili or something. There's a playful innocence to his scamper, juxtaposed against his horrific appearance. I did finally watch the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre back in October, but I can't remember if this is truly the way he moved in that movie. I think it's pretty spot on, but correct me if I'm wrong. It fits his character well, and it cracks me up, so I'm putting him in A tier. Next up we have Clown and what I'm calling the Paradox. For such an unfit person, he sure has a very athletic level of movement. His steps are huge, it makes him very imposing and intimidating, but what I love most is how he'll look around and occasionally flip his knife. It makes it one of the more interesting walks so far. And the paradox between his very clear lack of physical health but his athletic movement makes him all the more creepy. So I'm gonna confidently put him in A tier. Next up we have Plague with the Majestic March. Now, I'm biased because it's Plague, but I do love it. The way she carries herself, it's so regal. With the censer carried high in one hand and her left hand extended out and down, her walk is confident, and there's a lot of detail in this one with the incense smoke trailing behind her. It's not quite S tier for me, even though I love it so much, so I'm putting it in A tier. Next up we have Demo with the Roaring Rover. No, not all these names can be winners. At first, Demos is very basic. I mean, he's running fast, it's repetitive, but then he lets out that roar. He does slow down to do it, and it's a bit jarring because if you notice, the background doesn't slow down with him, which is kind of weird. But I love the roar. It never ceases to make him 100 times more intimidating. But that alone, to me, makes his walk so much more interesting, enough to be A tier. Next up, we have Pyramid Head with the Symmetrical Stroll. So I'll state the only negative I have for it up front. It is very repetitive, but I still love it. Maybe I'm just biased towards Pyramid Head, but even in this repetitive movement, there's a lot going on. The steps he takes are massive, and it's creepy the way he drags the great knife behind him with his arm out and palm up. His pyramid helmet bobs up and down, and his butcher's apron flaps against his knees. His movements are very unnatural, but in a way that serves the creepiness of his character instead of breaking immersion. I didn't feel I could go full S tier with him, but I'm confident with A tier. Next up, we have Pinhead with this swole saunter, because he looks like one of the gym bros coming out after chest day. Or he moves like I do when I throw my neck out. Kind of looks like he's suspended by marionette wires with his arms dangling at his side. For some reason, I always thought in game he was floating around, but it turns out it's because his upper half just doesn't move very much, so it looks like he does. I know I'm making fun of it quite a bit, but there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. Similar to what I said about Pyramid Head, just all of the weirdness adds to the creepiness of his character. So I think it's very well done, and I'll put it as another A tier. Next up, we have Artist with the artistic amble. There's so much I love about this one. They do such a good job making her movements eerie and bird-like. The arms stretched back, the massive stride that she has, the bobbing back and forth with her neck and head. It's so very well done, creepy as all get out. I love this one. It's simple, but effective. I don't think I can quite put it all the way in S tier, but A tier for sure. All right, next up we have the Unknown. Its movements are truly disturbing. The way it hobbles and twitches as it walks, it's definitely one of the more interesting ones for me, and it deserves A tier in my mind. All right, next up we have Spirit with the Conflict Within. This one is really interesting to me. The strained contortions as she switches between rage and despair are both really cool and really disturbing. There's a whole lot going on here, and even though I know it's on a loop, it really doesn't feel like it to me. And so that makes it our first one deserving of S tier, in my opinion. All right, next up we have Onryo with the lag switch. I love how when she's manifested, she jerks around at about 10 frames a second. It just looks all distorted and old school. It's unsettling and creepy, which serves her character perfectly. And so it's gonna be our next S tier. There's just a whole lot I love about this one. Or next up we have Dredge with the Slug Slalom, because it kind of looks like he's a slug sliding across the ground. Actually, quite honestly, it looks like he's downhill skiing. It's effectively gliding, which makes sense, but then there's these clear walking motions as if it's mimicking having legs. I love the head bob, and there's a lot of movement between its, for lack of a better term, face and then its appendages. It really does hide the repetition well. This is going to be another S tier for me. I think the Dredges is so well done. Or next up we have Xeno with the Creepy Crawler, and that's a throwback to all my 90s kids. So full disclaimer, the first two Alien movies are among my favorite of all time, so I'm gonna be a little bit biased. And yes, the other Alien movies do not exist in my mind, especially AVP Requiem. That was awful. But I think they nailed it here. Xeno's movements are perfectly done. It's immediately very different because it's crawling on all fours. It looks just straight out of the movies to me. It's got that massive tail dragging behind it. Because it has some subtle variety to it, and because it captures the movement patterns of the Xenomorph so well, I'm gonna put it S tier. All right, and then finally we have Chucky with the Fun Run. As much as Chucky traumatized me as a kid, and I legitimately have trouble looking at him in game, this one is an immediate S tier. It's simultaneously hilarious and terrifying to see a toy running at such high speeds with a knife in hand. But then there's a lot of stuff going on too. The faces he makes, the practice swings with his knife, and he just keeps flipping you off. To me, this is like in The Dark Knight, where the Joker is the source of all the tension in the movie, but at the same time, the comic relief for that very same tension he just caused. I'm really tense and unsettled just looking at Chucky, but at the same time I'm cracking up. It's just great, very well done, an instant S tier for me. So those are my rankings. Let me know where you agree or disagree down in the comments. Who's your personal favorite? If you enjoyed the video, will you let me know by hitting that like button? And remember, you're awesome, stay awesome, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.